American families move around a lot. Their kids grow up, they go away to college, they get a job 3 states away, they meet somebody, get married, buy a house somewhere else, and they start having kids. And then something happens that I've seen over and over since moving here. Mum and dad follow them. Not the kids moving back home, the parents packing up their lives and moving across the country to wherever their children and grandchildren have ended up. Our neighbours across the road, they did exactly that. The minute that he retired, they sold their house here in Tennessee and they moved to Arkansas. Why Arkansas? That's where their daughter and grandchildren were. Once work was no longer keeping them here, that was where they wanted to be. I also had 2 people I used to work with whose parents did essentially the same thing when grandchildren started arriving. In one case, the parents were retired. They sold up in Oklahoma and they moved here to Tennessee to be closer to their daughter and their new grandkid. In the other example, the parent was actually still working, but they transferred their job from Boston and moved here to be closer to their children and grandchildren. 3 different families, 3 different circumstances, but essentially the same decision. That's where our family is now. So that's where we're going. And I've seen it happen enough times to really start to notice the pattern. But a couple of weeks ago, something happened that made me admire that decision a whole lot more.
You better take cover.
Over the past couple of weeks, our house basically turned into a small, poorly managed hospital. All 4 of us got COVID, and not conveniently one after another, where one person goes down, recovers, then takes over while the next person goes down. Nah, that would have been far too well organised for us. At one point, all 4 of us were really sick. Nikki and I both completely wiped out. And I remember lying there thinking, what are we actually supposed to do? Because when one parent is sick, the other one typically takes over. It's not pleasant, but the system still works. But when both parents are sick, there is no system. And that's when I started thinking about those families again. Because until then, I'd mostly thought about grandparents moving closer in terms of what they got out of it themselves. They get to see the grandkids more. They get to watch them grow up, birthdays, school concerts, dance recitals, all the things you naturally think about when you imagine grandparents living nearby. But suddenly I was thinking about it from the other direction. What does having mum and dad nearby give to their adult kids? Because when your entire household goes down at once, being able to FaceTime your parents isn't quite the same as being able to call them and say, hey, we need help. And we didn't need somebody to come in and magically fix everything. We needed one healthy adult, someone who could make dinner, someone who could deal with the girls while we slept, or someone who could look at Nikki and me and say, hey, guys, go to bed. I've got this. And when you're healthy, those words don't sound particularly remarkable. When both parents are completely wiped out, they might be the most beautiful words in the English language. Now, I know if we'd still been living back in Canberra, I know exactly who we would have called, Nikki's mum. But we're not in Canberra. We're in Tennessee. And she's on the other side of the world. That's nobody's fault. We're the ones who chose to move 9,000 miles away and build our lives here. But it made me realize just how much difference there is in between having family you can call and having family who can come. And that's what those American parents I'd watched move across the country had done. They'd made sure that they could come. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't only about what happens when something goes wrong. Because hopefully you don't spend too many weeks of your life with an entire household sick at the same time. Most family life is much more ordinary than that. Picking the kids up from school, having them for a couple of hours because mum and dad have somewhere else that they need to be, or it's somebody dropping in for dinner, the grandkids spending an afternoon at Nan and Pop's house for no particular reason. And I think there's a big difference between seeing your grandchildren regularly and actually being a part of their everyday lives. Our girls know their grandparents in Australia. They love them. The grandparents love them. But seeing them is an event. It requires planning and usually months of it, sometimes years. Flights, airports, passports, 9,000 miles. There's no just popping over. And that's normal for our kids because it's all they've ever known. But watching these American families move closer to each other has really made me realize how different that relationship can be when grandma and grandpa aren't a plane ride away, when they're just down the road. And maybe part of the reason I've noticed this so much in America is because American families can become so geographically spread out in the first place. Going away to college is completely normal here. And going away, that can mean moving to another state or to the other side of the country. Then college finishes and the best job might be somewhere else again. People move for careers, they move for relationships, get transferred. And there's military families where moving from one side of the country to the other can just simply be a big part of life. And before long, you can have mum and dad in Ohio, one child in Tennessee, another in Texas, and another in Colorado. No one has left the country, but the family can still be spread across thousands of miles. And eventually, mum and dad can find themselves living in the place where they raised their family, except the family isn't there anymore. The kids have built lives somewhere else. Their grandkids are growing up somewhere else. And maybe that's when the question changes. Instead of asking, when are the kids coming home? It becomes, why are we still here? Especially once retirement arrives and the job that kept you in one place for 30 or 40 years suddenly isn't part of the equation anymore. And that's exactly what happened with our neighbours. The minute work stopped determining where they needed to live, they were free to decide where they actually wanted to live. And they chose to be near their family. And I think one of the reasons that decision stood out to me so much is because of where I come from. I don't remember hearing about parents following their adult children nearly as much when I lived in Australia. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen because, of course, it does. But when I think about families I've known back there, I can think of plenty where the movement happened in the opposite direction. Mum and dad moved somewhere, and eventually one or more of the adult kids would follow them. In fact, this reminded me of something in my own family. My grandmother, she lived into her 90s and she only passed away last year. But years ago, when my sister moved to the other side of Australia, my grandmother was not happy about it because my sister was the eldest daughter. And in my grandmother's mind, the eldest daughter had a responsibility to live near her mother so that when mum got older, she'd be there to help look after her. That probably sounds incredibly old fashioned nowadays, and I think it probably is. I was actually talking to a friend about this today, and she said the same expectation existed where she's from in the UK. It was just one of those old school ideas about family. When the parents got older, the children were supposed to be nearby, which is why I think what I've encountered repeatedly here in America stood out to me because the direction seems to be far more often reversed. Kids have left already. They've established careers, they've bought houses, started families of their own. And rather than expecting them to eventually come back, mum and dad made the move. I don't know whether Americans actually do this more than Australians, and maybe I've simply noticed it more since moving here. But I've encountered it often enough that It's become one of those little things about American life that really caught my attention. Once I started looking into it, I discovered there's an entire conversation in America around exactly this decision. Should we move closer to grandkids? Do we wait until retirement? How close should we live? What happens if they move again? That's a huge question. There are articles, retirement discussions, and grandparents talking about whether they should uproot the life they've built and start again somewhere else. So clearly, this is a decision plenty of American families are wrestling with. And moving at that stage of life isn't a small decision. Because by the time you've reached retirement, you might have spent 20, 30 years building a life somewhere. You've got friends and neighbors and doctors, you've got your church, your favorite restaurants. There's a whole network around you that you probably don't even think about because it's just there. And then your kids end up 1,000 miles away, grandchildren, a wife, and suddenly there's a choice. Stay where you built your life or start building another one closer to them. And that's the part I think I've come to admire the most. Because the people I've known who made that move weren't asking their adult children to rearrange the lives that they'd already built. They weren't saying, guys, when are you coming back? They looked at where their family was now and decided they would be the ones to move. In a way, I think they were accepting that the center of the family had shifted. The old family home might still be where everyone grew up, but home, in another sense, it had already moved, and they followed it. And after the last couple of weeks, I can see another side to that decision too, because family life isn't always birthdays and dance recitals. Sometimes it's chaos. Our girls demonstrated that rather well while we were all sick. Because kids have this incredible ability when they're ill. 1 minute, they're lying on the couch looking like they're at death's door. Oh, I don't feel well. You bring them a drink. You make sure they're comfortable. Give them a pillow. And then 20 minutes later, they're running around the house like crazy squirrels fighting over the TV remote. You got to ask, where did this energy come from? Just 5 minutes ago, I was considering whether we needed to take your temperature again. And now you're doing laps of the lounge room because your sister changed the channel. Meanwhile, mum and dad are still lying exactly where you left us 6 hours ago. Apparently, children get some special version of COVID where the symptoms temporarily disappear whenever there's an opportunity to annoy a sibling. Maybe that's the point. Being close to family means being there for all of it. The milestones, the ordinary days, and occasionally the complete disaster. I don't know whether this is something Americans do more than people in other countries. I only know what I've seen and what I've experienced. And since moving here, I've met family after family where the kids have built a life somewhere else. And eventually mum and dad have decided to go to them. I think what I admire about it is that they're not asking their children to bring their lives back to where the family started. They're recognizing where the family is now. And after the last couple of weeks, I appreciate that decision more than I ever did. If you enjoy these videos and you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description, and every coffee genuinely helps me keep on making this stuff. And whether your family is 10 minutes down the road or 1,000 miles away, give me a call. Say good day. Hooroo, mateys.
You better take cover.